So far, this series has proven that the Smogon Bans of Pokemon X and Y were fraudulent. Now it's time for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but before we get into the Greninja ban logic, I want to break down the chronological history just to kind of see what's going on. So, right after the release of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, we have a quick ban on Mega Salamence. That's coming up, so we'll just get into that when we do. So Mega Salamence, then Greninja at the beginning of the year. Metagross. This is where things like started getting kind of weird and like suspect tests, things not getting banned, things getting resuspected, and so on. Mega Metagross holds the distinct honor of being the first suspect to avoid Ubers since Deoxys speed form in the first round of X and Y testing. Then there was the Aegis/Unban, which was not successful. Oh boy, we get to talk about Landorus Incarnate as well, Shadow Tag, Sableye, and then the Sableye retest where, yeah, now Sableye needs to be banned because everything else has been banned. But that's November 17th, 2016. Right before... Why? What is even the point? Like, a day before Generation 7? How can anyone respect Smogon when they're just doing non-serious things like banning Pokemon the day before a generation begins? I don't know, but let's get into Greninja. This is one that I really went into because we started just seeing complete nonsense out of the Smogon ban logic where, oh, if you give a Pokemon an infinite move spread and every EV combination and every nature, then it has no counters, therefore it needs to be banned. So let's see how the retrospective is on Greninja. Also, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to leave a like, share with friends, comment your thoughts down below, check out the other videos of this mini-series. So Greninja was already a Pokemon that people thought should have been suspected, but the advent of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire sealed its fate. I guess the tutor moves made it too strong. Greninja was a Pokemon that boasted an incredible offensive presence thanks to the incredible base 122 speed, allowing it to outspeed almost every non-Mega Evolution available in OU. But that doesn't really matter because we have a 103 special attack and a 95 attack. That's not good. Like, how is it an incredible offensive presence when you have a decent, passable 103 special attack stat? Greninja's sweeping prowess was complemented by its wide move pool, great moves such as Hydro Pump for sheer power, and then it can also just miss a lot of the time, and people were running Scald or Surf, and that's another thing, you have to give Greninja perfect accuracy on top of that as well to make sure that it counters everything, and at the end of the day, it's just still a 103 special attack Pokemon. Extra Sensory for Mega Venusaur, Grass Knot for Water types, Ice Beam for Grass and Dragon types. While all this was great, none of it would have made Greninja the top tier threat that it was without the ability Protean. So I mean, it just has all that stab at 103. The thing about Greninja is that it's an incredibly frail Pokemon susceptible to getting one-hit KO'd that needs to two-hit KO in return, and it did have a very impressive speed for the time, 122, starting to really catch some wild speed creep. Now, by today's standards, 122 isn't that crazy because we have the Paradox Pokemon, we have Ultra Beast, and then we just have legendary Pokemon that make no sense being introduced in the game. Why is Spectrier 130? Why is Regieleki 200? And you can just use those Pokemon for free. So yeah, even for the time, this just seems like a balanced, sweeping Pokemon. Protean would change Greninja's type to whatever type the move it used, so all of Greninja's attack effectively had stab. But that isn't what makes 103 threatening. This doesn't seem like a huge buff at first. Again, just playing the weird, this Pokemon doesn't seem good, but that every ban logic uses. At some point, it just gets tired and it stops having an effect. As Greninja already has stab on Hydro Pump, but it all starts to become apparent once you realize Greninja's coverage moves are also backed by stab. So, while a mere coverage move might have lacked the power to KO something, a pseudo stab boost might be all it needs to give it that extra oomph to get the KO. So now we're also assuming that every matchup Greninja goes into, it's going to have the super effective KO. I was already sus of this ban back in 2015, and it was kind of the boiling point for me to just be I get it now. Smogon's a complete joke, and I'm just not in on the joke. But now, with, like, damage theory that I've been developing over the last generation or so, it just completely falls apart because we know 103, even with quad stab, is not workable. And Greninja was not running choice to even, like, try to find some weird stuff. Life Orb just means, yeah, it's 2-hit KOing everything if it doesn't find the super, and even some bulk Pokemon can survive the super. Assault Vest annihilates this Pokemon, and 95 not full EV invested Mix doesn't really work either because Mixed is fraudulent. As if that wasn't enough, Greninja also came with Spikes. That's right, they actually thought Spikes Greninja made it good. Kinda at a loss for words. Smogon and their over-reliance on entry hazard strikes again, which it could easily lay down as it forced switches. But it's not forcing switches unless it's like coming in for free somehow, and there's not really a lot of leads that see Greninja and go, oh man, the game's over. And then that means Greninja has to predict the switch to lay down the spikes, and then the spikes doesn't take effect until future switches, and they're going to be switching into something they think is favorable for Greninja anyway. The only way Greninja is forcing switches is if it's coming in as a revenge Pokemon, so that means like it should be trying to get back some tempo in a favorable matchup, but as we've learned through the rest of this series and a lot of the other ban logic, favorable matchups are bad when you just need to fabricate a reason to ban a Pokemon. So just more weirdness right there. And also, if Greninja's like coming in and it's not a lead or something and it has a Focus Sash, then there's a risk of the Focus Sash getting blown as well by injury hazards or if it's making an incorrect switch. I don't know how, like, this is an as if that wasn't enough. Spikes is a reason to get this Pokemon banned. All of this already had people thinking that Greninja could be a possible suspect. So we're talking about Generation, or like not Generation 6, but just Pokemon X and Y. Then ORAS released. We're not even talking about ORAS until this point, as it gave Greninja some tutor moves, Low Kick, and Gunk Shot. With Low Kick, Greninja was able to threaten Heatran, Ferrothorn, Tyranitar with just one move. Congratulations, a lot of Pokemon do that. But Gunk Shot was the real kicker, as it cleanly 2-hit KO'd every Fairy type that could have hoped to wall Greninja. And then Greninja also gets 1-hit KO'd by a lot of Fairy type Pokemon, so this is where we saw like, oh, there's no counters. This made Greninja a massive threat to both offensive and even defensive teams, as there were very few Pokemon that could switch into it and put a strain on team building. Just lies. Once again, just lies. Like, arbitrarily, like, oh, yeah, Pokemon exists, and if you want to deal with it, then that means you have to put a strain on team building, even though the definition of the tiering policy is that skill is based on assessing and dealing with threats, and then team building around it. Catering to the metagame is a metric to judge a player's skill in Smogon, but then when something needs to be banned, well, no, we can't have that now, can we? And that's assuming any of this is accurate to the game, but as we've broken down, there's a lie in every ban logic that we've seen so far. But there was some debating going on whether or not Greninja was broken, and there were some arguments made against the ban. Main argument were Greninja's stats, as its defenses were rather mediocre, so it couldn't take hits at all. Its inability to KO bulkier Pokemon made it difficult to sweep until late game. Wow, a cleanup Pokemon. I mean, if we're talking about that, then a Life Orb Jolteon is going to be faster, and it has Shadow Ball to just kind of like neutrally round out with the Thunderbolt. Not as crazy of coverage as Greninja, but we're talking about like every Pokemon being below half and then picking up 3 of them on a fast Pokemon because there's nothing left. A lot of Pokemon do that. And then, like, at that point, the 122 doesn't even matter. If you bring in something like an Alakazam, yeah, they're probably not going to have 120 speeds either. While both of these facts were true, Greninja's true strength came from its revenge-killing role. So you already have to be at a minus for Greninja to come in and then have pressure. Why is that a punishment on Greninja? Acting as a very reliable check to a majority of the metagame and putting the opponent at a disadvantage. The opponent's already at an advantage because it KO'd the Pokemon, and that forces the response of a revenge. Again, there's the lie. There's the lie right there. Also, eventually Greninja is going to run out of coverage. It can't just fabricate a 5th move in the middle of a battle, therefore it can revenge everything. It's just not going to get a finishing blow and then get taken out. it might get like 2 cleanups, but also it has to like switch out, because okay, it gets a KO, but then why are we not allowed to make an argument of revenging Greninja? Because then, oh, Greninja has all these moves and you can't like switch as it revenges or chip it away or anything. That just doesn't make sense. Another argument made was that Greninja had a small case of 4 move slot syndrome, leaving it incapable of threatening everything. I hope this is sarcasm, because yeah, it actually had a major case because they have to put 10 moves in its ban logic. While this was true to some extent, no, it's just true, this didn't change the fact that what Greninja could hit was still beaten all the same, and Greninja was still able to threaten a majority of the metagame anyways, regardless of 4 move slot syndrome. I would call that the most dishonest logic we've seen so far, but the Mega Lucario ban was just straight up lying, and we proved that through damage calculations. With this, they're just kind of saying like, oh, if we take every possible 4 move slot that Greninja has, metagame's always majority threatened, even though it's different Pokemon being threatened by every move slot. And you can never make a team that actually just can beat any other Pokemon team. So you're always going to have this. The ban logic is just so weird because it disregards that this is Pokemon, and that's true of many Pokemon in the game, but you have to over-exaggerate it for the thing that must be banned. Also, like, this retrospective, or like this article about the bans, doesn't have the same emphasis that we saw of the time, where it's like, oh, Greninja just has no counters, completely uncounterable Pokemon. They don't really stress on that. I guess that's because, you know, that argument never held water to begin with. So, insert Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire too much water joke here. I'm actually underwhelmed. I thought there was going to be, like, more to pick apart here, but the ban logic is just so weak that it's kind of nothing. Let's talk about Mega Salamence. Mega Salamence was easily one of the greatest catastrophes to ever befall OU. That's a lot of exaggeration, but we've been seeing people just kind of, like, be arrogant about the power of a Pokemon, and just like, yeah, everyone knew this thing was so busted, so obviously we just ban it, no questions asked. Mega Salamence was a Pokemon that had everything to not only be a massive pain for every team to face, but also a very independent Pokemon. I mean, there's a lot of independent Pokemon. Like, that's just how sweeping works. And as I've talked about, X and Y, Generation 6, Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire had, like, the most 6-0s because you just get your in, you set up, and then game's just kind of over. Dragon Dance, Shell Smash, a lot of things kind of set that up. Swords Dance on certain sweeping Pokemon, Nasty Plot, Calm Mind, etc. So the stats are incredible in every aspect, ignoring that it doesn't have an item. I mean, look at this. We have a 145, 120 without an item now. By modern standards, it's not crazy. So that's kind of like one thing I'm looking for. I'm like, all right, what Pokemon from previous generations that got banned is actually strong by today's standards? Now, if we have that, then maybe there's like some power creep to investigate or something weird. But Mega Salamence was just a sweeping Pokemon, so let's see where the problem came in. Complemented by Intimidate before Mega Evolving, excellent 145 attack to throw around. Again, this is the Mega. You only get one. You can't have Mega Salamence, Mega Lucario, Mawile, Kangaskhan on the same team. So, it's not like it's an infinite parade of threats. And the funny thing is, if you didn't ban all the strong Pokemon, then you're kind of contesting over the OP Pokemon, so not everyone's going to be like, oh yeah, Mega Salamence 100% usage because it's just the best. There's actually going to be stuff like that, and then there's going to be more counterplay options. Also, it's harder for Mega Salamence to set up when you just have Mawile sitting there. It has the Intimidate, so that's going to reduce the Dragon Dancing power, and you can't just KO it with an Earthquake, and Mawile doesn't have to Swords Dance and can just straight play rough the Salamence. So by this point, Smogon already banned all the power out of the game, which means, yeah, now this is kind of a problem. Mega Salamence also came with Dragon Dance to start some powerful sweeps and Aerialate to make use of some seriously powerful returns, as well as Earthquake to hit Steel types with. Keeping all that in mind, you would think Mega Salamence was an unstoppable sweeper. You'd be thinking right. There it is. They debated us. I was waiting for, you know, the devil's advocate, but here's the problem. Nope, you're right. It's unstoppable. Just the first Pokemon to ever exist where there's nothing you could do. But for all the wrong reasons. See, what made Mega Salamence so overpowered wasn't an offensive set, but a set that was mixed between defense and offense. Many people probably wouldn't have known this, but in Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, people were able to obtain a Salamence with Refresh. This is partially what makes Mega Salamence so hard to break. So we take all of the strengths of Mega Salamence, and then we throw them away to effectively just create a modern Terra Normal Dragonite. A method to remove any status condition inflicted on top of Roost. So yeah, you just have like Roost and then Refresh, but that only gives you 2 moves and no Dragon Dance. Mega Salamence surprisingly found its calling card as a mono attacking. So actually no, it's Roost, Dragon Dance, Refresh, and then like Aerialate Return. And that makes it too good. Yeah, this is news to me. Everything about Mega Salamence getting banned was 1 Dragon Dance and the game is over, but also that's just like Smogon players being bad at team building, as we've been talking about forever now, where it's like, okay, you bring in your Stealth Rocks Pokemon, they lead Mega Salamence, free game for the Mega Salamence player, don't be a Timmy that just does bad strategies on default 100% of the time. So the great defenses, great healing options, great offensive typing and flying and Dragon Dance. Great offensive typing and flying. Great offensive typing in flying. Mega Salamence was capable of sweeping teams with relative ease. Yes, the Roost, Refresh, Dragon Dance, flying move. It could very easily sweep almost every kind of team that didn't run mediocre Pokemon and sets. Yes, as we keep talking about, like, it's about forcing the reasons for a Pokemon to be banned. Oh, you beat this Pokemon that's about to be suspect tested? That means you're just a bad player running low-tier garbage that shouldn't even matter because it can't even survive in OU because we're just better than you. I mean, ignoring, like, yeah, this thing still gets absolutely clocked by any Ice-type move. Also, Fairies existed, so Dragon-type Pokemon getting just kind of a global nerf. The crazy thing about Mega Salamence was how little opposition there was during discussion. Sure, Mega Salamence was 4 times weak to Ice, weak to Stealth Rock, usually relied on a single move to attack, and was resisted by most Steel types, but there were just tiny complaints compared to the massive strengths that Mega Salamence boasted, as it was still sweeping teams like no one's business all the same. Most people knew this though, so they went along with the quick ban hype. Cheers for the brave souls that tried to oppose the ban. Quick ban without hesitation. Also, if that set was so oppressive, why not just ban Refresh on Mega Salamence, because it's like weird transfer stuff that wouldn't even be usable in official formats? I think this was just Smogon trying to be like, yeah, we're different and we're going to keep like every transfer jank, even though it doesn't apply to any of the balance decisions made by the developers. And they were just very, like, it seemed like at the time they were allergic to trying to be too similar to the official format. That evasion will never ever be allowed, no matter how many nerfs it receives and no matter how much power creep makes it unviable. Same thing for Spore. Grass-type Pokemon, safety goggles. Nope, we still have to keep the Sleep Claws, and then just everything else where it's like, yeah, some, like, Game Freak responded to the bans and to the player complaints, and then those decisions were just never reversed. And also item claws, like, yeah, we're just never going to make it to where item claws exist in Smogon because we are the anti-official format in every possible way, no matter how detrimental it is to the game. But yeah, this is a really weird and niche isolated problem they created for themselves that didn't even last any amount of time. Maybe people would have adapted and just kind of dealt with it. Maybe Refresh in Smogon's already broken format just broke the format too much, because as an official player, yeah, Salamence never gave me any problems because I played a lot of Mega Sableye and I could just Will-O-Wisp the thing, or you could just get a lot of status and eventually find a way of making it not really exist as a Pokemon. But at the same time, if like it just became flavor of the month, it only has return, then yeah, Steel-type Pokemon deal with it. If it's not a hard lead Pokemon, it loses a lot to the Stealth Rocks, it's going to have vulnerabilities, and eventually it just gets dealt with. So again, it's like the Mega Pokemon. So if you had to like sack off 2 Pokemon to deal with a Mega Salamence you let ramp up on a Dragon Dance, well, that's the Mega. Now you have your Mega to try to get more back because that was the Generation 6 metagame. Now, this is a weird one because Mega Metagross wasn't banned, gets a close call retrospective in the article, but then was banned in Generation 7. Also, like, just look at how few votes determine this for like the entire player base of Pokemon. Because as I've also said in all of my Smogon videos, that it isn't something that only affects Smogon. The casual format is so popular that it's going to spill out to anyone participating in Pokemon battles, and then that's going to create a lot of arguments and problems between the real competitive community and the Smogon community. Whenever there's a disagreement over the ban list, or someone isn't keeping up with all the bans and all the non-stop nonsense, and then like you bring something that is banned by Smogon, even though Smogon rules were never agreed to, but the Smogon player just assumes that only that everyone playing a Pokemon battle is automatically abiding by Smogon rules, and then there's just problems. So very, very small pool of elitists just kind of creating problems for everyone Pokemon. That's awesome. And then we can just kind of see the ban happiness get it going further and further. So like Metagross not getting banned, and then for some reason Generation 7 does get banned. Once again, this just kind of shows that Smogon only creates a less balanced, less competitive, less enjoyable metagame with all of their nonsense ban decisions. So you've stripped all the power out to where now Metagross just kind of becomes the threat. But that's the end for this article, and we really only got to talk about Mega Salamence and Greninja, so the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire side, not really as strong here. But we can go back to just the direct chronological history and talk about Landorus, where we get enough talking about its power. Lurking in the shadows beneath other more powerful threats. This is why the Landorus one doesn't make any sense, because Landorus Incarnate was like 10% usage, while Therian was running around at 30% usage. Actually, let's look up the May 2015 stats. Okay, so this was before Landorus Therian started getting like 30% and Smogon became a complete monoculture, but like Landorus is down here at 19th, May 2015, and that warranted a ban. That is as flavor of the month as it gets for a Pokemon that just randomly became a problem. Generation 5, X and Y, no problem. Took a bit into Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire and then suddenly like, yeah, it's gotta go. What? Okay, so Landorus eventually earned itself a suspect test in its own right, boasting an absurd power level at virtually no drawback. Once again, we have to exaggerate as much as possible when we need something banned. Life Orb Sheer Force, yeah, we know how that works, which made Earth Power a chore to switch into. Is this one of those things where Landorus is just like the ultimate revenge Pokemon, so it's trying to come back from a negative? With Earth Power tearing through virtually all non-ground immune Pokemon, Landorus could afford to run virtually anything else it wanted, still be effective. Knock Off, Focus Miss, Sludge Wave, Psychic Calm Mind, Rock Polish were all common, mitigated some of Landorus's lesser matchups, beating Chansey with Knock Off and removing its Eviolite. Blissey's still fine. Rock Polish, and also like Calm Mind Chansey. These kids were just not with it. Or Rock Polish, allowing it to devastate offensive teams if given the chance. So we give Landorus the free Rock Polish, and now it's too much of a threat. Gotta go. Yeah, that's like another weird thing about all the ban logic. You give the Pokemon, like you give the threat a free turn, gotta ban it. Being so versatile, Landorus pushed the viability of its few hard counters, Cresselia being the most notable example, admitting that it even had hard counters against it. Wait, was Cresselia like ranked higher? Oh, Clefable. Yeah, Clefable had to have been unaware, right? If it's getting 14% usage. Okay, so I did want to look at the Clefable Mega Salamence matchup, and it's not like, oh yeah, Clefable just like max defense wins against it, because there was power there that the return on just Adamant, I guess giving it to the Salamence. Actually, yeah, you could go Adamant and then +1 and you're fine. So, okay, yeah, it could get away with doing this. Double Edge not a KO, and also takes recoil, which means the Moonblast doesn't quite KO it, but it also means like, okay, let's say Dragon Dance on the Salamence, it trades that for half of its health against whatever Pokemon, starts going for the sweep, but then you bring in the Unaware Clefable. Unaware Clefable gives up a lot of its health, like 70%, so it's on 30%. Leftovers can kick in here, and then the return for the same. So like, yeah, your Clefable's not happy after that, but it can revenge the Salamence because Moonblast, uninvested, does a lot of damage. So if like something just hits the Salamence super, it's going to fold even with the 95-130 or 95-90. And again, neutral hits are doing around 50%. So yeah, like, yeah, not free, like, oh, Clefable's a hard counter, therefore Salamence ban invalidated. I was starting to think that Unaware Clefable didn't exist in Generation 6. I don't remember using it a lot, unless it was, like, mid-late Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, when I got, like, top 100 on the OU ladder or something. I might have been running out. I remember, like, starting to do the Clefable abuse in Generation 7, then a lot in Generation 8, because that Unaware just, like, too good, especially into Dynamax and stuff. But, yeah, like, with the lack of Clefable discussion in any of this, I was also thinking, like, oh, did it just not... was it not Unaware? No, it had Unaware. Yeah, the ban logic's so bad, I'm just out here getting gaslit, but how did this happen? For, like, the 10% usage Pokemon that doesn't have a centralizing argument, that doesn't have a no counter argument, get banned. Alright, so let's take Landorus and let's put it up against our boy Silvally. How strong is the Sheer Force Life Orb? Doesn't KO 95-95. Psychic, like the non-stab, also just completely crumbles. So it's really like it has to hopefully one-hit KO something on the Earth Power, and then just kind of two-hit KOs everything else. I guess the Earth Power is going to find it. Like, what's a 75-80 Pokemon looking like? Decent KO chance. I wonder if it just kind of keeps proving that Life Orb is fraudulent, because, like, Sheer Force Life Orb, yeah, that's a combo. Yeah, that might be, like, what makes Life Orb a considerable thing in damage theory. But this... Actually, yeah, but the freedom to choose your moves kind of tips it over compared to, like, a choice specs or something. You lose the secondary effect, which is a weird interaction with wall breakers and stuff. 115. Like, yeah, we have a damage Pokemon here. 101, that kind of kicks up. But that's why it was only like 10% usage. Like, it just kind of hits sometimes. Okay, now let's look at this alleged Alright, let's look at this Chansey matchup, because they say you knock off the Eviolite, and then Chansey can't exist into Landorus, which is false. I mean, I guess, like, you knock off the Chansey and it has a hard time after the Landorus, or Landorus then switches out into a physical Pokemon, and Chansey's forced to switch or it falls apart. But, I mean, am I missing something? That's how I feel about a lot of these damage calculations, because, like, yeah, there's a lot of text here, there's a lot of moving parts, so we can just type in the wrong thing or get something wrong. But it's like max hit points, max defense, just natural special defense Chansey, losing its Eviolite into same level Landorus, Sheer Force Life Orb, and this is also where I'm just like, yo, Calm Mind Chansey, Calm Mind Blissey is the truth. And then, like, it can plus 1 and just be stronger, and then, like, it's nothing even after the Eviolite getting knocked off. And because of sheer force, it loses the effect, so it can't, like, drop a special defense and eventually chip it away. Chansey wins! Look at this! We found the lie! Bro, that's like its own meme for all the ban logic. Is Chansey in the top 20? Oh, it isn't. Wow. If I'm thinking Generation 6, I feel like Chansey was on a lot of teams. Okay, so could have, should have had more pickup, but even then, like, that's just wrong. And now that means you have a knockoff, removing your 20 moves that you can have, Calm Mind, Rock Polish, and it's a 101 speed. So a lot of Scarf Pokemon can find it, and Garchomp just outspeeds and starts bringing some pain. Okay, so Life Orb Garchomp, the Outrage doesn't get it, but I mean, like, just innate legendary stats. And then the Dragon Claw, it's a 2-hit KO. So Earth Power doesn't do it. Like, you think, like, oh man, yeah, we have Sheer Force Life Orb on the Landorus. It just KOs everything. Now, it does lose 20% because of the Life Orb, but now that's just silly. Also, I guess that's where the hit points actually matter. So Garchomp surviving 1 health after taking a high roll Earth Power and then cleaning up the Landorus. And then your Garchomp still has, like, the opportunity to outspeed something, because 102, pretty good. Or Choice Band Garchomp was always the truth. You can switch it into the Earth Power, which is what they said you can't do, into the Landorus, and that's why it needs to be banned. And then you banded Outrage the mofo and one-shot it. All kinds of weirdness going on in the game. So underdeveloped in Smogon. Yeah, they really overplayed this thing's damage. The usage was low, and it took long for this Pokemon to be discovered, but that just became Flavor of the Month, and that's usually what leads to a Smogon ban, like we see with Swagger, like we see with Baton Pass, or nonsense like Shadow Tag. Funny thing about the Shadow Tag ban is there was that tournament that Philly Beat You hosted back in Generation 8 that I participated in, and the first round, I went up against a Smogon player who saw, like, the non-Smogon rules, the official rules, and was just like, oh, I'm just going to bring ban stuff, brought in the GothStall, and lost round 1. So, like, I didn't get chumped by the Shadow Tag, and that's why I always thought that, like, the ban was funny. So, Smogon kids just kind of, like, again, doing their default setups, their default, I don't know how to play the game, and I only know how to, like, stall and put entry hazards down. Then they get, like, trapped in and then set up on by GothStall, and they lose the game. So, a flavor of the month strategy that's really good at beating default Smogon players got banned. Wow. And then that was, like, with the Sable Knight suspect, and then they re-suspected it, and then, yeah, got it banned right before. Which is also weird, because it took 2 years of Sableye, and then they were just like, nah, we can't have it anymore. Even though, like, I did Sableye abuse the entire generation. And if anything, it's like, yeah, if a Pokemon needed to be banned, it's the setup tank that can Will-O-Wisp and just remove all physical Pokemon from the game. With Prankster, had the Mega Evolution into Crazy Stats, into Recovery, also had Calm Mind, also had Snarl. It was a tank setup Pokemon. It was my dream Pokemon that couldn't get Magic Bounce. So, Taunt, any of the counterplay you normally have around this Pokemon, didn't exist. This should have been like the quick ban instead of Mega Salamence, and then just watch the rest of the game develop around that. Because this is like the unfair no counterplay Pokemon, and it gave me like an 80% win rate in ORAS, because you just set it in. Like, you just lead Sableye, game's over. But the funny thing about the Mega Sableye ban, it was mostly just like, oh man, you could bounce entry hazards. Uniquely strong control of the hazard game, thanks to Magic Bounce, made Sableye's stall teams difficult to break effectively. So they weren't even, like, playing it right, and that was enough to get it banned. So there we go, guys. Generation 6 ban history. Not as exciting as the other ban histories, but I guess that just kind of goes with the territory of Smogon just becoming more and more of a joke. They really exhausted it back in X and Y, it seems, and then Omega Ruby Now Sapphire was just kind of like, whatever. It's like, oh man, you're banning Greninja. We've already memed this logic. Mega Salamence had, like, a unique thing that I never heard about until today on a Pokemon that is your standard scary Dragon Dance sweeping Pokemon. And then the Landorus ban was also something that I've memed on a lot in the past. But it's like, yeah, we just talk about that again. It's where, wait a second, you banned the wrong Landorus that has the lesser usage and is more dealable. And then Shadow Tag, and this is after, like, you also banned Swagger and Baton Pass for the rest of the generation. Yeah, it ran out of steam. And by running out of steam, we also just kind of ran out of all the dunks because we went so hard with Pokemon X and Y. Either way, guys, that kind of concludes all of this stuff. Hope you enjoyed this saga. But even the retrospective, like, man, Verlisify always right. But I think the retrospective for me, and the takeaway for me, is Verlisify always right in kind of a weird way, because I was thinking, okay, maybe since I was, like, less experienced back in the day, you know, I didn't have the strong enough arguments, and it might have warranted all of the mockery people made around my videos. But no, it's like, I was referencing the same ideas I was getting on back in time. Now, I will admit I didn't have as much content creation experience with dealing with stupidity, nonsense, and all of these weak arguments to make my points get across in the best kind of way, but the idea was still there. But also, Smogon was as underdeveloped compared to my now pristine arguing skills when it comes to Pokemon logic, so yeah, it still holds up in kind of like its own weird way. Now, this book isn't entirely closed because we can still talk about the tiering policy framework and the definition of skill and uncompetitive in Smogon. So that's going to be a ride, but for now, this is what we got. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.